good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you find yourself in the world. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Sophia Arend, and I am a senior analyst at the Global Blockchain Business Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's GBBC Virtual Members Forum. This is a bi-weekly webinar series showcasing the innovative work of our members around the world. And today we have the pleasure to be joined by Anya, crypto economist and business development at Power Ledger, for a presentation on how Power Ledger is building a blockchain-enabled electricity market. Before we begin, I would briefly like to introduce Anya. Anya is a crypto economist and also works in business development at Power Ledger. She is a strong advocate for renewable energy and blockchain adoption, and regularly speaks at blockchain and energy events. Representing Power Ledger, Anya is a director of Blockchain Australia, an organization aimed at advancing blockchain adoption. And prior to Power Ledger, Anya advised technology startups and large corporations in a variety of international commercial roles. Anya is also the recipient of the 2019 Australian Blockchain Leader of the Year Award. We are so pleased to have Anya here with us today, and we welcome your questions at any point during today's webinar. We kindly ask that you submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll take them at the end of Anya's presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to hand things off to her to begin. Thank you.
Sophia, thank you for the introduction. I'm super happy to be here. Always love talking about what we do, and it's really nice to have an audience that we typically don't get to speak with. So I'm imagining there's quite a lot of people dialing in from the States. So hi everyone, and thanks for getting up so early in the morning. So let me share my screen. And now, so I'll just start by talking a little bit about who we are. So we, a relatively young company, got established a few years ago out of Australia. But since we have really been taking over the world, we're in 9 countries now, and we have 24 large customers across the globe. Really, I think one of the advantages of being in Australia was that we saw a transition happening in the energy markets really early, and that's because Perth is just such a sunny place, so lots of people were choosing to install rooftop solar. So close to 1/3 of Australian houses now have rooftop solar, and on the back of that, we saw a major shift happening in the energy networks, energy network stability, and the energy market. So if you think about it, pretty much for the last 100 years, we had a very centralized energy system where you had a central generator, whether it's a coal-fired power plant, and the energy was moving from that plant down through the network to the individual households or businesses. And the households or businesses were just taking the energy and then paying for it, and all the financial transactions were moving the other way. And since the solar panels have gotten so much cheaper over the last few years, close to, I think, 80% cheaper, because they're manufactured in China and there's some efficiencies there, that more and more people are choosing to install them, which is changing the market entirely. You know, and some people might install solar because they're very environmentally conscientious, and there are good reasons for that, because a kilowatt hour of renewables that you use is actually saving close to 1/2 kilo of CO2 emissions. So a kilowatt, I find that it helps to talk about it in kind of human terms. Kilowatt hour is really how much a refrigerator typically needs every hour. So if you think about it, a refrigerator is running and saving 1/2 kilo of CO2 emissions. That's quite substantial, if they're sourced from renewables. So some people have really strong environmental motivations. Others are really driven by the whole idea of being self-sufficient. They don't want to be caught out if there is a blackout, for example. So I grew up on a little island north of Japan, and blackouts were really common. So I just grew up with constant blackouts. But we don't want that anymore. We're kind of used to the fact that, well, energy is always there, it's always available, and we always know how much we're paying for it. And there are costs to us getting so comfortable with the energy, and I'll kind of explore those a bit later. But basically, and the third reason why people install solar is really to pay less for their energy. So you can get close to 20% less on your energy bill every month if you choose to install solar. So all of a sudden, everyone's doing it around the world. And what do we see happening? You know, remember that kind of centralized system that I've described before, energy moving one way and financial transactions moving the other way? So now we have multiple people becoming both the consumer of energy and the generator of energy. So the energy has to move both ways, and the financial transactions have to move both ways. And really, there has been nothing out there to facilitate that happening. There hasn't been any marketplace available for that. So this huge transition is both a challenge. It's a challenge for the grid. It's a challenge for the grid because in the energy sector, the generation always has to equal consumption, otherwise we have blackouts. So then when all the solar comes online in the middle of the day, the traditional generation has to ramp down rapidly. And then when all the solar disappears in the evening, it has to ramp up. So that's a major challenge for the grid, you know, and that's why we have all this kind of redundancies in the system. And then from a kind of household point of view, well, if I'm a person that has installed solar and I'm offsetting my consumption, my bill is lower. But then what happens if I'm not home during the day, or if I'm going on vacation? Then I have all this excess solar, and maybe, you know, I get paid for it when I sell it back to my energy retailer. And the energy retailer might set some sort of price for it. That price is really subsidized by the government. So the government gives us money to incentivize us to install renewables. But what we see happening around the world is that because that subsidy is taxpayer based, it's not going to last forever. So the subsidy kind of tends to start quite large, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually disappears altogether, like it has done recently in Japan. And people are left with no way to monetize their solar panels. So that was a very long intro to say why I'm so excited to work for PowerGen. And that's because I think in a very real way, we help people monetize the investment that they make in the solar panels and batteries faster. And by doing that, we're actually incentivizing people to buy more solar panels and buy more batteries, which decarbonizes the whole world. So as I mentioned, we're only a few years old, but we have kind of grown pretty quickly. And that was a strategic decision that we've done. So we started off in Australia, and then we moved north into the Asia region. And I'll talk about some of our projects a little bit later, but we're in Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, India. Then we've kind of progressed into Europe. And then more recently, we have kicked off a number of projects in the United States. So, you know, why blockchain for energy trading? So as I mentioned, now we have people who are both buyers and sellers. So we need to create an entirely new marketplace to allow them to transact in energy. And if you are creating an entirely new marketplace, then you can build it using some of the traditional tools, or you can actually build it using blockchain technology. And blockchain technology is, has a number of benefits because you have lots of transactions that are being tracked in a very accurate way. You have an immediate audit trail that's baked into that. You have a financial settlement layer for all these micro transactions. And then further down the road, I'll explain how blockchain really comes into its own with virtual power plants, which is really trading energy, but using the household batteries or electric vehicles. So the blockchain technology started off really small. Just a few years ago, it was valued at about $200 million US, and it's expected to grow to 18 billion by 2025. So as I mentioned, that we really kind of do three major things, and I'll come to that on the next slide. But the blockchain has benefits that are slightly different for each one of them. So it's the establishment of the marketplace, and then some of the verification that we do around the energy source and when the energy was produced and timestamping it, to then providing a particular algorithm for the settlement of those energy trades that is transparent and can be verified by the auditor, by the households, by energy retailers, and by all the major players in that energy sector. So really at a kind of fundamental level, where our journey starts in our technology solution is by reading smart meters. And smart meters is something that everyone has. It's a meter that can record your consumption, your energy consumption. And I remember from my childhood, you know, it was just a little meter that was sitting at the entrance to the house and was just kind of spinning and recording consumption. And now it's basically the meter that records consumption, generation, and has some sort of ability to communicate. So it's connected to some sort of communication device, or it's built into that. And that's where the word smart comes into that. So it's a smart meter, meaning it can push data with particular frequency. And all we do is that we take that data and we put that on the platform, and we work with any type of meter, you know, whether it's pushing data every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes, and even every 5 seconds. We actually think that in the future, meters will be pushing data really rapidly, and that's going to help us optimize the entire energy system and remove some of the redundancies that have to be baked into that now. So we take the data, and the first thing we do is that we verify that the energy has indeed been produced at that time, at that location. So it sounds pretty simple, but it's a really valuable service for a number of reasons. So some of our energy retailers provide premium products. So one of our partners in France, Equateur, they have a premium energy product that you pay extra for. And that helps you confirm that indeed what you're buying is 100% renewable and it's been produced locally. And our technology facilitates kind of the back end of that. So as an individual, I can go, okay, so I want 50% of my energy, let's say, to come from hydro because I want to support hydro, and then 50% of my energy to come from my local community generator, or whatever that is, that split might be. And then in real time, we equate generation against consumption, so you can actually be sure that you're not paying extra for nothing. You actually are paying extra every 5-minute interval because clean local energy has indeed been generated at the time. And I think by providing that kind of granularity and that kind of provenance, we can help more people, we can incentivize more people to start buying renewable and local. So then after the sort of that verification part, which we call the vision feature of the platform, we move on to the trading. And the trading can be done in a number of ways. It's really an energy marketplace with buyers and sellers. So as a household with solar, I can set the minimum price at which I'm willing to sell my excess and a maximum price at which I'm willing to buy it. And then the algorithm that we've built looks at all the available renewable energy every 5 minutes and then distributes that equitably if it matches my price thresholds. And if it does, I either get credited or debited depending on whether I'm selling or buying energy. So I'll talk about some of those projects globally, and in particular, one of the largest ones in the world, if not the largest peer-to-peer energy trading projects in the world, is happening in Bangkok in Thailand, and that's run using our software. Then kind of the third part after the traceability trading is the renewable energy certificates. So renewable energy certificates is something that it's a scheme that has been developed globally to facilitate investment in renewables. So as a large renewable generator, I can receive those certificates. I'm eligible to receive them. And they typically, one certificate represents 1 megawatt hour of clean energy that's been generated. And then I can sell that certificate to whichever entity is actually obliged to buy them, whether it's a retailer that has to ensure that they buy a portion of their energy from renewable sources by virtue of buying those certificates, or it could be a polluter that has to buy them. So that process in itself is been working okay, but it could be working a lot better. And I'll go into that in detail a bit later. So as I've described, this is the vision feature of our product. I suppose another thing that people really like about the vision feature is the dynamic pricing. So we've run experiments where we've let people set their prices as frequently as they want, and you start to observe really interesting behaviors. Because, you know, in the past, you might have heard, well, people don't care about energy. Well, people actually really care about energy. If they have their own, and our platform operates out of a web browser, so you have your own login details. And if you give people login details, you start learning all sort of interesting things from a behavioral point of view. So some people log in, 20 times a day, and they change their buy and sell prices, and they really enjoy that process of trying to kind of do a bit of energy arbitrage and trying to sell their excess for as much as they can. While other people set the price once a year and just forget all about it, and they're just happy for the trades to be executing as they are and just getting paid at the end of the month. But not every marketplace that we operate has that feature, because some people really prefer just a simple, straightforward, I have excess energy, as long as there is a buyer, then I'm willing to sell it. So another thing to just mention on the energy trading, I find that sometimes it helps to speak like through a concrete example. So let's say I'm a household with excess solar, so I can either kind of push that solar to the grid and not necessarily get paid anything for it, or get paid some sort of small subsidy for it. And I have a neighbor who hasn't installed solar because he can't afford it, or maybe his house is in the shade, and he's paying 25 cents per kilowatt hour at the same time as I'm pushing energy for free back to the grid. Most likely, because we are neighbors, he's actually using my energy, but who's collecting the payment? Well, it's the retailer who's facilitating the collection of the payment and the energy accounting. But if there was a way to, for me to set my own price, let's say 15 cents, and sell that to the neighbor, what happens is I'm 15 cents better off for every kilowatt hour, and my neighbor just saved 10 cents if they were buying for 25 cents typically. So that's kind of like just a trade between two individuals, and then you can kind of roll it up because then you can look at trading between two apartment blocks, and then you can roll it up even higher, and then you can start seeing suburbs trade with each other. So really the platform and the core functionality doesn't change from layer to layer. It's how you choose to aggregate those meters that changes. VPP, that's a virtual power plant. That's probably one of my personally favorite features of the platform. That's energy trading with a household battery. And household batteries have a huge role to play in grid stability. So it's really great when people do choose to install them. However, household batteries tend to be expensive. So I'm talking kind of $10,000 and upward. So not everyone's gonna make the decision to install, and they're coming down in price as well, but it's still quite a big decision for most households. And what we find is that if you allow people to monetize their battery faster, then they're going to make that decision to buy the battery. So we're doing that through our VPP product. And people can get paid in a number of different ways for having a household battery. So one way that's particularly relevant in countries where you have really kind of peaky wholesale energy prices is that households can sell the energy. Like, let's say I'm notified by a PowerLogic platform that right now the energy prices in a wholesale market are really high. So some of the energy retailers might actually be struggling with buying enough so that they can supply to their customer base. So if you sell the energy that's stored in your battery right now, instead of using it, to that retailer going to give you a really good price for it. So an example of that is in Australia, a few times a year, we have energy prices that go up all the way to $14 a kilowatt hour. So that's really high. If you think about a retailer that has to buy that energy for $14 a kilowatt hour and sell it for 25 cents a kilowatt hour, that's a really tough place for them. So if instead we can help households work together with retailers to alleviate some of those high prices and share the savings between them, then we're kind of helping the smaller tier 2 energy retailers, while at the same time helping the households pay off the battery much faster, maybe in a few years rather than kind of a decade. So that's on the energy arbitrage side of things. And then the other bit that's really exciting to me, because I've been looking at that more and more recently, is the grid stability services. So as I mentioned, with all this solar coming online in the middle of the day, the grid needs a lot more support to remain stable. And that's kind of around the frequency control. And up to now, really, it's just the larger players that could participate in providing that service to the grid. So, you know, you had to have a really large battery if you wanted to kind of bid on that market and get paid for providing that service. So you might have heard, you know, around the world, kind of really large battery players doing that. So, but what about the smaller guys? So if I'm a family with a 10 kilowatt hour battery, but if I'm working in conjunction with another 10 families, then all of a sudden we have a battery that's a 100 kilowatt hour battery. You know, and if it's 1,000 of us, it's like a megawatt hour battery. Well, then what's next, right? And as long as people can kind of be brought together to act as one, then we have the virtual power plant. And that's what the virtual kind of bit, that's where it comes together. So we don't need to be co-located, we just need to be acting as one. If we can act as one, we can start bidding for provision of those services and getting paid from the grid manager for providing them at a really good rate. And of course, there is a lot of things that need to come together to make this happen. There needs to be a really efficient system of notifications. So I need to be notified when that's occurring. I need to be able to opt in or opt out. There needs to be a financial settlement layer that's really transparent and robust. So as I'm providing that service, I need to be kind of confirmed that I have provided it, and I need to be getting paid for that as close to real time as possible. Because we're finding that if people are getting paid in real time, they're much more likely to participate. So that's the virtual power plant feature of our platform. And of course, that kind of goes pretty seamlessly into the electric vehicles. So electric vehicle is really a household battery on wheels. So it can do a lot. It can even do a lot more, as long as you know, as long as you always know that you have the right charge to go from point A to point B or whatever you want to be. Anything else that's left in the battery can be used to either do energy arbitrage or frequency control services. And there is a number of experiments that have been run in Denmark in particular with Nissan Leaf, which has that bi-directional kind of ability to charge and discharge, where people were able to make up to $2,000 a year just for casually participating. Casually participating means you're not even changing your behavior, you're just opting in, or you just opted in to actually be a part of that grid stability exercise. So think about it, on a car that's not very expensive, making $2,000 for not changing your behavior at all, it's a really attractive proposition. So there is a number of big projects starting to happen globally. It's still pretty early, but I think it's a super exciting space to watch. And so we're coming to the environmental commodities trading. So that's the renewable energy certificates. And as I mentioned, large renewable energy generators, so let's say you have a wind turbine or a large solar farm, you're actually entitled to receive those certificates. But the process of receiving them is quite cumbersome. So you have to have an audit done, obviously, and then you get those certificates from a registry, and then you try to sell those certificates to through a broker-dealer. That's how the process currently works. It's okay process, but I call up a broker-dealer. Broker-dealer comes back to me, says, okay, I found a buyer. The buyer is prepared to pay that much for the certificates. And I go, okay, well, that's fine. Let's do that. And I sell those certificates. So there is it's just not as efficient as it could be. So we've spoken to a number of customers, and they told us that, you know, they could be losing 10 to 15% of the value of the certificates just through the fact that, you know, they've either done the audit and they haven't actually got all the certificates that they were entitled to because they've made a mistake in that audit process, or, you know, the broker dealer might not have found the best price for them that's available on the market, or they, you know, they did get the good price, but then they had to wait 3 to 6 months to get paid. So we think that by automating the process of minting the certificates as the energy is being generated, by using the data from smart meters, we can actually improve that entire kind of value proposition. We're thinking we can make it a lot cheaper for the green energy generators to receive their certificates. So let's say I produce like a kilowatt hour, then right away we register on the blockchain and we tokenize that micro certificate, right? And then I'll produce another kilowatt hour. We do that right away. And then eventually it aggregates to 1 megawatt hour, and that's an entire kind of tokenized certificate. And then we have a 24/7 kind of marketplace for trading those tokenized certificates. And that's our TraceX product. So because it's a kind of fully transparent marketplace, you can actually see the price that you're getting for that certificate instantaneously. As a buyer, I know that that certificate is valid, that it hasn't been sold to someone else. And then when I buy, and then when I retire it against my obligations, no one else can buy that certificate again. So we think that blockchain is really an ideal technology to kind of improve on the renewable energy measurement, verification, and trading process. Here are some of our projects. These are some of our Australian projects to begin with. So this battery that's operating using Powerledger software is actually just a few kilometers away from me in the city of Fremantle, Western Australia. So often I cycle by the battery and have a look at it. Then we have a number of apartment buildings that we provide energy trading platform for. Then we have the Wongan Hills project in regional Western Australia that has really helped that community bring new business, because previously they were losing businesses to other shires, and they were able, through improving their energy, kind of their local energy network, they were able to incentivize current businesses to either stay or expand. Then we have the Maddington, that's a solar farm in Perth, where the company Powerledger is based. That's also utilizing Powerledger platform, using in particular the vision feature. Then we have the Vicinity shopping centers. Vicinity is really keen on ensuring that all the tenants can buy renewables if they want to. So if you think of a shopping center, really it has massive roof space, so it's perfect for installing solar. And then the operator of that shopping center can start selling solar to individual tenants, and it can start selling it at different terms as well. So if I'm a cosmetics brand that is super interested in being 100% sustainable, and that's how I advertise, then I might actually bid more for any renewable energy that's being generated at the moment and that's available. We have some more apartments. And that's probably the project that I wanted to touch on in a bit more detail, because it is the largest peer-to-peer energy trading project that's going on globally. That was a new development built by our partner BCPG in the middle of Thailand. So there are 6 new buildings there. There is a school and a dental hospital and an apartment building and a shopping center and 2 more buildings. And BCPG, typically a renewable developer would install solar, and then they would sign long-term agreements with whoever is using the solar. And those long-term agreements they could be a little bit unpredictable from a point of view of return on investment for the developer, because they don't quite know how much energy would be consumed by that tenant. The tenant themselves might not necessarily know how much they're going to need. So we've de-risked that entirely for all parties, and I think this particular project is a really good example of win-win-win, because the developer is selling all of the energy that's being generated to the tenant's paying for everything that's being generated, but in turn, when the tenant is kind of understandably worried, well, what if I don't use all of it? They're using our platform then to sell any excess they have for more than what they have paid for it to the developer. And of course, once everyone moved in, that's exactly what happened, where certain parties figured out, oh, I'm actually needing to use a lot more energy on Thursday and a lot less on Tuesday, or whatever that might be. And then the trading of energy really started happening. So every time we do like a platform demo, and you can actually see the energy trades happening every 15 minutes, and it's quite high volume. I find that really pretty exciting, especially because I think this project kind of highlights opportunities in the developing countries like Thailand to sort of rethink and recreate something that was pretty standard in a completely new way. So we're replicating that model with BCPG across Thailand in a number of locations, including Chiang Mai University. And well, we're in Japan, Malaysia, India. We have a number of projects in Europe. European market is really interesting because Europe is super interested in provenance. So, people want to know, where is my food coming from? Where is my honey coming from? Where is my clothes coming from? And we're finding that more and more people really care about where is my energy coming from? And they want that same kind of degree of understanding of what they're consuming. And we aim to provide a really integrated and engaging experience through the platform. So people want to spend time there and they want to understand their own consumption and where the energy has been coming from. And as I mentioned, we have a number of pretty exciting partnerships in the United States. And this is our team. This is our beautiful blue wall that's actually right behind my desk, and our lovely team of business developers and business development, and then engineers and the analyst team. So with that, I would love to take some questions if you have any, and thank you so much for your for attending and for listening.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you so much. We've had quite a few questions come in, so I'll kind of just go down the list and we'll start off. So the first person said, thank you, Anya, and thank you to Power Ledger for today's presentation. They're wondering if Power Ledger is involved in Taiwan or has plans to be involved in Taiwan, as they seem to be really motivated to be green and efficient across the region.
That's a great question. So we had a number of early conversations with Taiwan, but nothing has eventuated yet. But we are continuing those conversations. It's just probably too early for me to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of folks are dialing in from their countries, and they're curious whether Power Ledger is there and will be there. And someone has asked, what are the biggest challenges in the U.S. to scale? Whether regulations or incumbents are a roadblock to that.
Well, I think US is just a fantastic market, really. So the main product that we see in a lot of interest for is our TraceX product, which is the verification of renewable energy certificates and the trading of those certificates. And we estimate that that's probably around a $3 billion market. And the way we're estimating that is that there's about 200 million renewable energy certificates, retailing somewhere between maybe $10 and $20, but some of them retail for $200. So it's a huge market for us. We think that on the renewable certificate side, really there is not a lot of boundaries to scale right now. It's really about who can establish partnerships the quickest and who can provide the most value and the best experience for the buyers and sellers of those certificates.
Yeah. We've had a few questions come in about getting this started and set up from scratch. So if I'm a consumer or household interested in participating in one of Power Ledger's projects, how would that come about? What do I need on my end to do that?
So whoever your energy retailer is, they would need to be our customer. So an energy, we're really a B2B business for energy trading. So a retailer would need to open up that feature for energy trading to their customer base. So, you know, if you have any kind of, if you'd like to participate in a Power Ledger platform, the first thing to do is to contact your energy retailer.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned smart meter collecting being kind of core to the platform. We had someone ask, with smart meter collecting and recording data about consumer usage, how does this work in relation to privacy? You know, does the consumer own their data? Does Power Ledger? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have we're very serious about privacy, and we have had to sort all of that out when we've recently entered the European market, because as you know, European market is super strict around GDPR. So to get any of our European customers signed on, we had to provide a lot of kind of assurances to them and all around the policies and exactly how the data storage is structured within the platform that enables kind of full anonymity and ability for individuals to opt out and not to have their data visible. But on the other hand, all we're really collecting is basically two sets of ratings. It's the import and the export, or consumption and generation. Plus we have the timestamp and we have the meter ID. So if you obfuscate the meter ID, or if you have any other number that's replacing the actual meter ID, then there is very little ability to get back to the original user. So whatever data retailer provides to us, it's the retailer's responsibility to ensure that the data has been provided in such a way that it's compliant with the local privacy provisions.
Right, absolutely. We had someone ask, what kind of deals is Power Ledger doing with grid operators and owners, and whether the grid operator is asking for any sort of fees for this P2P trading if the Power Ledger system is using their lines?
That's a really good question. So we think that for grid operators, it's a really interesting kind of dilemma and a space that they're dipping their toes in. Because on one hand, they want to maintain utilization of the grid, because let's say if I have solar and I don't have a way to sell my excess, I might go, well, the only way I can really save my excess is by installing a battery. And once I've installed the battery, I might become might want to become fully self-sufficient and just opt out from the grid, you know, write a letter to my network operator saying, please disconnect me, I don't need you anymore. And if that happens, that's bad news, because then the cost of maintaining the grid falls on fewer and fewer people. So it becomes more and more expensive for people, especially for those that can least afford it, because, you know, the only people that are going to get left behind are the people that don't have enough money to buy solar and battery. So that's not kind of a scenario that any network operator wants to see. So then we actually find them quite helpful in working with us, and we've recently run a number of trials that show kind of the right tariff structure that needs to be put in place in order to make energy trading even more attractive. And in particular, the network tariff part of your energy bill, we think needs to be brought in line with the actual usage that's occurring. So instead of being a flat rate, it needs to be reflective of the part of the network that's being utilized. So if the trading is occurring just between, you know, two homes that are right next to each other, and then we're only utilizing a really small part of the network, then we shouldn't really be paying a fee for the entirety of the network. So that's kind of one of the, I think, ways that that could get resolved. And obviously the network operator still needs to make money, because they're providing a very important essential service to ensure that we all have power. So then there is an ability on the platform to set up kind of micro fees for every transaction that's occurring.
Thank you. We've had a number of people ask specific to their markets. So somebody asked from sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Nigeria, someone in Colombia. They said they're interested in participating. How does someone get in contact with Power Ledger? How does that relationship start to launch a product in a new country?
Yeah, so obviously, like, our website is the first first place to go. That's powerledger.io. We also have an email address that's support@powerledger.io. We also have a pretty active Telegram channel, if you're using Telegram, where we kind of try to answer as many questions as we can and engage with everyone that's supporting us. So you find that as an official Power Ledger Telegram chat.
Great. What we'll do is we'll follow up with everyone on this webinar and provide the links to that so you can get in touch with Power Ledger and Anya and learn more. I'd also like to ask, at the consumer level, on trading on the platform, you mentioned setting your price. What kind of knowledge or education is required in order to do that effectively, to effectively trade energy as a consumer?
Well, practically zero. Because if you can go in and if you can put in because the interface doesn't look anything like complex kind of trading algorithms, nothing like that. All that it looks like is just you see your own energy usage. So you see like helpful graphs, and you have a place where, let's say you're a buyer, you just say, well, anytime energy is below this, then I'm willing to buy. So if you set your energy buy price at, for example, 0, then the platform will notify you and saying, hey, you've set it at 0, so you're never gonna buy renewable because no one is actually selling their renewable at 0. So we recommend that you set it at something a bit higher. You probably, we find that most people set it at below the grid price. So if the grid price is 25, they want to buy it a bit cheaper, so they might set it at 17 cents or something like that. Some people might actually set their minimum buy price at higher than the grid price because they really want to support their community and they want to buy renewable and they're prepared to pay a bit more for it. And same for the sellers. If I want my energy sold, I'm not going to set the price super high. I'm going to set it at some sort of reasonable level, slightly below the grid price. So there is it's very intuitive, and we do kind of poke you a little bit if you've said something that's completely doesn't work at all.
Right. No, it sounds definitely like a user-friendly platform.
Yeah.
We're coming up on the hour. I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to tell our audience about Power Ledger or future plans. What's on the horizon for you all?
Well, so obviously, our kind of, I think, same as for everyone, the last few months been completely different. We tend to travel a lot. We tend to speak at conferences and meet with our customers face to face, and we had to transition all of that to video conferencing. And as a result, unfortunately, I don't feel like we've been able to engage as much with our community. So that's, one of the reasons that I'm doing this webinar. So I suppose if you would like to know more, then definitely go to our website, subscribe to our newsletter, and get involved, because we are working in a very exciting space, and we do see a lot of opportunity in Europe, United States, and Asia in particular, and some of the markets that we're not in yet, like you've mentioned, someone from sub-Saharan Africa was asking, we'd love to get into those markets and we'd love to bring that technology there. So if there is anything we can do to facilitate that or to bring this about, then please let us know.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Anya. Opportunity is ripe. We will send those links around to everyone who tuned in today, and a recording will also be made available online. We appreciate your time, especially. Thank you for joining us in the evening. And thank you to the Power Ledger team for everything you all have done. We look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thanks, Sophia. It's been a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Thanks all so much for joining us. Like I said, we'll send those links around in a recording. All right, everyone, have a good rest of your day.
Bye.